Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tasneem, for that wonderfully and over-generous introduction. You're very kind. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's a wonderful opportunity not just to meet with all of you, to talk a little bit about what we've been doing and what we're going to be continuing to do together, but also recognize a number of things. Recognize, first of all, our extraordinary MP and your MP and our Minister, Ahmed Hussein. To recognize, as Tasneem pointed out, the tremendous friendship between Canada and Pakistan as exemplified by this extraordinary Pakistani community, Canadian community. Thank you so much for being part of this tonight, but thank you also for being involved as Canadians, as citizens in our democratic electoral process. Thank you for coming out and caring about how we build a better future, not just for our community and our kids, but for the entire country. This is an important thing. Thank you all. You can give yourselves a round of applause. Obviously, I'm very much looking forward to having a bit of a conversation with Ahmed about some of the things we've been doing. But obviously, there's a few things that have happened recently in the news that have got a lot of people talking. These have been two very big days for the Canadian government. Today, I was just out in Vancouver where we announced the largest private sector investment in the history of Canada, a $40 billion liquid natural gas investment that is going to, well, first of all, it demonstrates that Canada can continue to get our resources to new markets and develop our resources, but to do it responsibly in partnership with Indigenous peoples, thinking about the environment, and of course replacing coal-fired plants in Asia with cleaner LNG. This was a very good day for Canada, for British Columbia, and for our resource industry. Of course, yesterday we did something big too. We signed the new we didn't sign yet, we'll be signing in 60 days, but we got an agreement in principle on the new USMCA, the updated NAFTA. And what it is fundamentally about is ensuring that our workers, that our businesses, that Canadians continue to have access and have good jobs linked to the largest market in the world, just to our south, continuing this close and strong friendship with the United States that goes so far beyond any two leaders and is all about the people, the businesses, and the cultural ties. That's what this is all about, and this is what we are celebrating today as well. But ultimately, governing is not about those big announcements or those big things. Governing is fundamentally about people. It's about understanding how to listen to Canadians and draw them out so that they are part of the solutions we're building. If we have, over the past few years, been able to get the lowest unemployment in 4 decades, get to a point where we have the fastest growth in the G7 as we did last year, it wasn't necessarily just because of government policies, or even because of government policies, although we like to think we had a significant role to play in that. It was ultimately because of Canadians, because of hardworking business people and family members and individuals and students who are stepping up, who are confident about their future, who are willing every day to contribute to building a better future. For me, being a prime minister, being a political leader, very much is like being a good teacher. Now, a good teacher isn't someone who has all the answers and gives them to their students. A good teacher is someone who empowers their students to find the answers to for themselves, who takes big, sometimes scary, intimidating concepts and frames them in a way that their students can actually take ownership of them and feel confident about their place and their path in the world. Well, that's what good leadership, political leadership in the 21st century needs to be all about. And that's certainly what, with an incredibly team as so well exemplified by Ahmed and the other members of our cabinet and of our caucus, really, really understand. That governing Canada can be seen as really easy because it's just about bringing out the best in Canadians. And that's what we need to do. When I travel around the world stage and people say, oh, you're so this or you're so that, I say, no. I'm just a reflection of how Canadians want me to be, want us to be. So everything that we get credit for in the world these days, it's because of all of you. And all of you representing this extraordinary diversity and the very best of the entire world. The secret of Canada is that we have drawn together stories and perspectives and identities and religions and languages and backgrounds from every corner of the world and recognized that that is a strength, not a weakness. That meeting, getting to know, and befriending someone who is very different from you is not a challenge as much as it is an opportunity. Because you expand your own perspective. You see different ways of looking at an old problem. You discover solutions, and that's what we have done, community by community, over the generations, over the century and a half of Canada's existence. And that is, quite frankly, a lesson that has never been more relevant today in the world than it is right now. This is an extremely important time for Canada to continue to step up and lead by example. Because at a time where there are tremendous divisions in the world, where the politics of fear, of division, of polarization, of excessive nationalism can easily take hold when people are anxious about their futures, it is much better for us to pull together and allay those fears. Say, yes, we are facing great challenges, but you know what? As communities, as a country, we have faced down greater challenges before, and we will overcome these challenges the same way we always have, by being strong, confident, optimistic, and mostly by pulling together. That's what is the best thing about Canada. And my friends who are all gathered here tonight, vous êtes rassemblés ici ce soir parce que vous appuyez le Parti libéral du Canada. Vous reconnaissez que c'est important d'avoir une vision positive pour l'avenir et de travailler, de contribuer pour le faire. Alors, I want to thank you for your contributions and your support of the Liberal Party of Canada as a way of bringing people together in politics. And yes, we're about 12 months from another election campaign, and I'm going to need all of you for a few things. Yes, I want you to stay involved and continue to contribute. Yes, that's important. I want you to step up and go knock doors for Ahmed, and I want you to be involved in volunteering and making phone calls and reaching out to get more people involved. These are all important as well, and it's going to need a lot of that to pass a positive message. But mostly, what I want from each and every one of you is to be part of a positive conversation about politics. Don't let someone play the politics of fear, negativity, of polarization. Don't let them get away with it. Because it's always easier to try and scare someone into voting some way, to get someone angry enough to vote a certain way. All you have to do is give them a push. But for us, for Liberals, it's a little trickier. Because if you want to say to someone a positive message, which is, come with us and we'll build a better country together, well, convincing someone to step forward, to step up, to come along is harder than it is to push someone away. But ultimately, it's the only way to build a strong community, a strong country, and a better future for our kids. And that is the message that we will be giving over the coming year to our friends, our neighbors, to Canadians right across the country. And you are essential to getting that message right. So tonight I'm very excited to have an opportunity to exchange with Ahmed, who of course is an extraordinary member of the team, has himself a great story about why he is such a passionate and devoted Canadian. But as we talk, I hope we will be able to share a little bit of the joy that comes with this responsibility that Canadians have bestowed upon us. To help bring out the very best of Canadians and build the very best for the future for us all. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, and thank you, Ahmed, for working so hard to pull this great crowd together tonight.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister. It's great. Once again, let's thank Prime Minister Trudeau for being here and joining us in York Southwestern. It's a great crowd. I wanted to begin by saying something really brief about leadership. A lot of times, you know, it takes a great leader to appeal to the better angels in all of us. And there's two visions of politics. There are politicians who think that the easier way, the way for the least resistance is to just appeal to what divides us and to pick people that they'll engage with and people that they'll exclude. The harder part is to engage everyone and get different perspectives, because through that you actually get strengthened in your own opinion, because you will be able to be better informed. And that is why I joined the Liberal Party of Canada, because it's the party of inclusion. It's the party that celebrates difference and diversity as a strength. And I have to credit the fact that it took leadership to get it fully there. We had to pay to become members of the Liberal Party of Canada. It was under the leadership of this leader, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, that opened the doors and made membership free in the Liberal Party of Canada. That's a huge step. It's a huge leap of faith on behalf of Canadians. And I think we should applaud to that. So I just wanted to briefly give a shout out to leadership and the courage that it takes to appeal to the better angels of Canadians. And this is the result that you see. I'll get to my first question. Prime Minister, I want to thank you and congratulate you, our Minister of Global Affairs, Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Chrystia Freeland, our wonderful team, our envoys in the United States, the team back in Canada, our caucus, for the new United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. I think it's amazing. It will ensure that we have market access to the biggest economy in the world, more prosperity for the middle class, continuing to ensure good quality jobs in Canada, and prosperity for all of us. What would you say is the main point, the main key aspect of that agreement, this new agreement that you want to share with the room?
Well, I've been talking over the past couple of days with business leaders, with entrepreneurs, with you know, CEOs of big banks, but also I've been talking with ordinary Canadians, people who just get that now we have secured the relationship that, you know, quite frankly, Canadians and certainly Americans have tended to take for granted. The longest shared border in the world, the deep history of connection between Canada and the United States, and even in a time of uncertainty and a little bit of protectionism, we have been able to continue to secure our access, our privileged access, and our partnership with the United States and with Mexico in a way that guarantees growth and prosperity for Canadians, for workers, for business people here in Canada, for investors for a long time to come. And that's the big, big win that we have. And that's something that's going to make a huge difference in quelling some of the fears and anxieties that people have had about trade and about where the world is going over the past years. We also had some, fairly, firm rules or fairly firm principles that we weren't going to budge on. One of them is we needed to make sure that the deal was enforceable and fair, and that meant protecting something called Chapter 19, which is really about making sure that people follow the rules, and that we managed to protect in its entirety. We've also protected our cultural industries. Obviously, it's really important for Canadian identity to be able to have our own movies, TV, our own broadcasting, our own radio, our own cultural identity separate from the United States, and we've managed to protect that. We also were able to protect our supply management system and protect our agricultural industry, which is also very, very important. So we had some very clear things that we knew we needed to make for a good deal for Canadians, and we actually got them. Now, there's lots of people going to say this or that, and you could have done this, you could have done that. the bottom line is, and there's always opportunities to do better, because we know better is always possible, but getting a good deal for Canada and for Canadians was something that we needed to do, and something that together we did. And the last thing I want to say about that is, over the course of the summer, I must have met thousands of Canadians, got letters and emails from people who all said the same thing. Stay strong, be firm, and keep going. Stand up for Canada. And every single one of you who said that is part of why we are here today with a new USMCA agreement. Because Canadians remained united and firm, polite, but strong as we are. And we got to the right place where we needed to be. And we all together owe each other a huge thank you. So thank you, all of you, for everything you've done.
Standing firm for Canadian values and for Canadian interests while ensuring prosperity for our future. I want to talk about another key priority for our government, which is attracting investment. Attracting investment to create good middle-class jobs for Canadians. But we know that investment follows talent. And if the talent is not there, the investment won't come. And so, as much as we are trying to increase the capacity and the ability to develop local talent and skills in Canada, what more can we do to attract more talent to come to Canada, especially knowing that there's a global race. There's a global race among nations for that highly mobile talent that can go anywhere at any time.
Well, quite frankly, you're absolutely right. Countries around the world are realizing that in order to keep growing, they need to bring in more highly skilled immigrants, keep growing their communities, keep growing their countries. Very few countries are as advantaged as Canada is in terms of immigration, and the reason is very, very simple. Canada is lucky around immigration because Canadians, even at a time of uncertainty around the world and worries about refugees and immigrants, Canadians remain positive about immigration. Canadians understand right across the country, even in places where there were, like I remember traveling through rural New Brunswick, and they were saying, we need some Syrian refugees in our community because you know, we've got empty houses for them, and we want to grow our economy and grow our communities again. There is a real understanding that immigration and bringing in people from around the world to build their success here in Canada and contribute to build to this country is essential for our continued well-being and prosperity. And that is what has created Canada. The waves of immigration come over the past generations has created what we are now, a country that actually understands that the best way to define our identity isn't around skin color or religion or, you know, traditions. It's around shared values. And every community in the world, as they come here and learn and grow as Canadians, become an exemplification of these universal human values that we live by in Canada: openness, respect, compassion, and willingness to work hard, a desire to be there for each other, a generosity of spirit, a seek for justice, all these things that everyone can see as the foundation of our resilient Canadian communities and our country, is something that is a real strength in this world where so many places are still trying to define themselves as us versus them. And in Canada, well, we are all we are all us. And that is something that is exemplified by so many communities, but I can't help but think of the extraordinary contributions of the Pakistani Canadian community through business, through philanthropy, through science and research, through hard work. This is the story of Canada I see right here in this room, and it's something to celebrate, but it's also something to continue, which is why we will continue to defend our immigration system, which is rules-based, rigorously applied, and even with the irregular arrivals and people trying to create a crisis or create scares around that, every single person who arrives across our borders is fully processed for security checks, fully processed within the rules established in the Canadian immigration system, and our system remains strong and continues to apply. And that's what gives confidence to Canadians, and that's what means that we can turn around and do things like the Global Skills Visa, which means in 2 weeks we can bring in top talent from places around the world, because we know that if a company wants to set up a new engineering shop here in Toronto, for example, they bring in a top 2 people from somewhere else in the world, and then they hire up lots of Canadians and train them up to do that job, because our raw talent, the graduates of our incredible STEM programs across the province, across the country, are just looking for those great opportunities, and we are providing them with an openness to immigration that is a huge advantage in Canada versus the rest of the world right now.
Absolutely, Prime Minister. The welcoming nature of Canadians allows us to lead on immigration around the world, but also our integration policies. There isn't a week that passes by when we don't have a government leader from Europe or other parts of the world coming to actually study how we do integration in Canada. 85% of newcomers in Canada choose to take the last step in integration and become Canadian citizens. 93% of them learn English or French very quickly through our integration program.
And that's
we're leading in this field.
But that's something that, quite frankly, I only learned once I got into politics, that this was unique. I knew that 80% plus of immigrants that came to Canada became citizens, and I just sort of naively assumed that, well, all countries must be like, that's how immigration works, and I discovered that no. Canada is very, very special in that we encourage and value, and everyone gets to become full citizens, where, as we know, once you become a citizen, well, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian.
Absolutely. Prime Minister, I want to go next to, so, we talk about investment, we talk about our strategy of investing in innovation, in IP, making sure that we have more market access to our country of 37 million people, having way more market access through rules-based fair trade agreements. But you always revert back to the middle class. You always talk about that. You always talk about the importance of the middle class and focusing our energies and priorities on the middle class. So why is that important, number one? And two, how does that fit in with the bigger picture?
Actually, it's great that you asked that question today, because today, on October 2nd, 2012, I stood on a stage very much like this one in my home riding of Papineau and launched my leadership campaign to become leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. So that was 6 years ago. Man, time flies. And by the way, I remember that it's October 2nd because I chose that date because it would have been, well, it was or is my little brother Mishi's birthday. And it's a day, we lost him 20 years ago this fall. But I still celebrate his birthday every year, so it's wonderful to be celebrating Mishi's birthday with all of you here today. He would have loved this place particularly. Phil, you've got a great place here. But that speech I gave to launch my leadership campaign recognized that there is a real challenge around our Western economies, and we're seeing it right around the world. The fact that over the past years, the wealthy have done very, very well. But most people, the middle class in our countries around the world, have sort of stalled, have seen the economy grow, but haven't felt the benefits of that growth adequately. And more than that, we're anxious about their future, about their capacity to retire, and mostly about their kids' capacity to succeed when it felt like the middle class had stalled. And the transitions and the disruptions going on in workplaces, whether it's robotics or AI or offshoring or different job markets, was really a source of real anxiety for that middle class. And we recognized from the very beginning that that was one of the great challenges we had to solve. And that politicians who'd seen that anxiety out there had done a good job so far of pulling on that anxiety and inflating that anxiety to try and get elected through fear and division. But nobody had done a good enough job of saying, well, let's recognize that anxiety and try to allay it. Let's try and put forward solutions that will actually make our society better and stronger. Because there is no question that regardless of how well the small fraction at the top end of the income scale do, an economy doesn't do well unless everyone has a chance to do well, unless the middle class is thriving. That is the rule we know about economics. And trickle down doesn't work. You need to grow the economy from the middle class outwards. And that's why some of the very first things we did when we formed government was we lowered taxes on the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. Then we brought in a Canada Child Benefit that gives more money to 9 out of 10 Canadians and has lifted 300,000 kids out of poverty across the country. And those, and you have to understand what those measures actually did. Those measures put more money in the pockets of ordinary families, gave them confidence in their future, allowed them to invest in after-school activities or new school for the new clothes for new school supplies, new clothes for their kids, better groceries, the kinds of things that really matter in people's day-to-day lives, and that has led to increased confidence, increased economic growth, and quite frankly, a Canada that is less prone to being fearful about the future, and that is key to continuing to draw out the very best of Canadians. There are politicians out there who think that the job of politics and of government is to protect us from the very worst among us. Well, I like to think the opposite. The job of a government and leadership is to bring out the very best within us. And that's exactly what we're doing with the focus on the middle class.
Finally, Prime Minister, this is more of a two-part question. You've seen the Liberal Party of Canada evolve in your lifetime. You've made some really important and progressive change within the party mechanisms since you became leader. So how does that put us instead for the upcoming campaign? That's the first part of the question. The second part is something that I struggle with often, and I'm sure all Liberals ask themselves this question, which is, how do you respond to the Conservatives who, by default, always revert back to the politics of fear and division, despite the issue, whether it's immigration, whether it's talking about justice or the economy or even, trade? They can't bring themselves to applaud the government even once for having done a good job at concluding a very important trade deal with the United States and Mexico. So how do you combat that without losing the positive politics that you champion so much?
Well, I'll start with the second part first. You weren't in the House at that point because we were just 35 MPs sitting in the far corner of the House of Commons. But when Mr. Harper, as Prime Minister, moved forward on the Canada-Europe trade agreement that had been many years in negotiating, the very first thing I did in the question period following that was stand up and congratulate the government for having moved forward on an important trade deal for all Canadians. Because this idea of automatically hating something just because of who did it is a weak point in politics that, quite frankly, I know Canadians are better than. So I was happy to recognize what this was. I mean, then when we formed government, we actually had to do a fair bit of heavy lifting to actually save that CETA deal, but that's another story. But the fact that we do need to recognize when good things happen is, I think, part of what Canadians expect and what Canadians want. It is so clear to me, from having had the experience in 2015, that a positive, compelling message that brings people together, that refuses the politics of personal attacks, that refuses the politics of division, of scare tactics, whether it's snitch lines or hijab attacks. That kind of approach that Stephen Harper tried does not work. And I remember actually being perhaps overly confident. I said to myself, when we went from that third-party, distant corner of the House of Commons to forming a government in a single election, I said, you know what, we proved that the politics of negativity and attack don't work, and the politics of being positive, of expecting more, of treating electors and Canadians like rational, thoughtful, value-driven, intelligent citizens and not just blind consumers of politics of fear and division. We proved that that works, and that will have changed politics forever in this country. Okay, it didn't. We are now looking at perhaps what will be the most divisive and negative and nasty political campaign in Canada's history. And I can tell you that we will do the same thing we did in 2015. No personal attacks, strong differentiations on issues of policy, so Canadians know what the clear alternatives are. I will not pull any punches, nor did I against Stephen Harper on matters of policy, but I will not engage in personal attacks, and none of our team will either, right? Yeah, because this guy's so negative, you know. I mean, I don't think I've ever not seen him smiling, but anyway. We will always look to bring people together, and it's for a very, very simple reason. It is because once you've gone and divided and angered people in order to get elected, it becomes very, very difficult afterwards to pull them together in a way that actually allows us to solve the challenges that we need to solve. So to run on division and fear and easy populism actually makes it harder to do the good things that must be the central purpose of why we run for office, why we make the sacrifices we do for our families to try and build a better country through politics. And that brings us to what we've done with the Liberal Party over the past years. Ahmed mentioned we opened it up. So all you have to do is register online to be a Liberal for free, and you get to be a member of the Liberal Party. You get to be a supporter of the Liberal Party. You get to help participate, help volunteer, and help create this movement every single day. Because ultimately, campaigning and governing needs to be about the same sort of things. It needs to be about having genuine conversations about how we're going to build a better world together. And the more we are able to have real conversations, door to door, with people, on the phone, talking about how we can come together and build a better future in a thoughtful, positive way that doesn't play up fears or divisions or us and them. That is how we continue to build a stronger country, and that's something that we're seeing around the world is falling a little bit out of fashion. It's easy to play up populism and nationalism and fears, but Canada needs to continue to demonstrate that the politics of rational discourse, of positive solutions, and mostly of bringing people together is more important now than it ever has been, and that's what we are going to do together over the next 12 months.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister, for that wonderful chat. I just wanted to thank everyone who participated, who came, who organized this event, all the volunteers, and you are the ones who keep us going, and we are deeply grateful.